I'd love a manager. I could use some help, obviously. I work in an ice cream shop. I just actually heard some of the guys were talking about Colbert's looking for writers. If we could submit, I'd love to submit a submission.
Yeah, we could submit.
You know those guys?
No, but I'm good at guessing emails. You know? You just kind of watch the credits, take a crack at it. Stephen Colbert at Colbert.com. You know, whoever the producer is at Colbert.com. You try the Gmails, try the Yahoos. You go back to Hotmail sometimes if you need to. Sometimes they just have a .me. There's all sorts of websites out there.
I could do that. I really need somebody with connections that can kind of plug me in, you know?
Yeah, but aren't you, someone told me you're opening for Nikki Glaser this summer, 22 Cities?
That's not me.
Hi, I'm Ethan Alter from Yahoo Entertainment. It's great to be speaking here today with the crew of Crashing. We've got Pete Holmes.
Hello.
Aparna Nancherla.
Say hello.
And Zach Jerry.
Hello. I like it when we all say hello.
There we go.
It
Saying
feels
hello
better.
is a good way to start.
Would you mind saying hello?
Hello!
Thank you very much. I like a good hello. Wonderful to be here.
The show comes back for second season this Sunday at 10:30 p.m. on HBO, so everyone's going to tune in for that, obviously. Pete, to start off with you, I mean, in real life, obviously, you have a successful podcast, a successful stand-up career, a successful HBO show. And in the show, though, you play a complete loser. So I guess the question is, how does it feel doing that? Why would you do that to yourself?
Oh, Ethan, you are a magical man. I love you. Well, I guess the whole point of Crashing is that the funniest part of somebody's career is when they're struggling. And that's why like, if Pete, my character, oh my God, if this guy, if he gets too successful, the show just becomes Entourage, which is a fine show. I'm just saying, it's also an HBO show. I'm just saying, our show is about the grind. So even if you're not trying to be a comedian, if you're trying to be a writer or perhaps an architect, trying to think of other jobs, I think you can relate to the drive of those early years, because those are the funniest part. We're handing out flyers. I used to do warm-up, like I would warm up an audience like this for a live taping. All sorts of weird, absurd things that we get to cover on the show.
Right, yeah. And the show, it's set in the present day, we should specify though. So you're playing, in the present day, a past version of yourself.
Yeah, that's right. What was the show we were talking about, Outlanders?
Yes,
Our show's a lot like Outlanders. In that.
You're time traveling to the present day.
That's right.
Yourself, yes.
And I wear a kilt, no undies. That's what we do. What it is it's 2018 on the show, but I'm basically playing the 2008 version of myself. But everybody else that's in the show, like Sarah Silverman was on the first season, Hannibal Buress. Second season, we have Bill Burr, who's one of my favorites. Obviously, the wonderful Aparna and Zach Cherry to my right.
Seamless.
John Mulaney, some really, really wonderful guest stars. So Pete is kind of, my character Pete, is going through this world and finding couches he can crash on and getting a lot of advice and learning about stand-up and the city at the same time.
Right.
So I also want to point out I have 2 mugs.
Oh, yes.
Can we get an insert that I have 2 mugs?
If we get 3, you complete the set, I think, and you get a prize.
Ethan, give me your mug, please.
Absolutely. Here you go. Pile them up. See if you can stack them.
Appreciate it.
In the meantime, Aparna and Zach, I mean, Pete obviously plays a loose version of himself as Pete in the show. How much are your characters modeled after yourself?
Follow-up question, how many mugs do you have?
Yeah.
I only have 1 mug, notably.
Okay, well.
2 less than you.
Here you go.
Aw.
Thank you.
Now I'm the
Sharing
only
his
one with
Gender
one mug.
equity.
Yes, gender equity. Excuse me, let me get you one more.
One more.
mug.
I think you
so
gotta go
much.
one more.
Oh, very topical.
I would say the characters are pretty, I mean, for me, it's pretty close to myself. My character is a stand-up. Her name is Anaya. It's a jump. It's a different name. Still starts and ends with an A. But I'm still a stand-up. I'm sort of in an earlier phase of my career. Sort of the first season you saw us barking, as Pete was saying, around town. But yeah, a lot of it is just comedian culture and sort of behind the scenes, like what it's like to bond with other comics and what are your pitfalls and triumphs coming up sort of early on. So I think that part was easy to draw in actual life. It's like, am I acting? Is this real? They didn't laugh. That feels real. Yeah.
But a lot of the material is yours for sure. Even though you're playing.
Oh, right.
This is where it gets very outlandery.
Right.
If I know the show Outlanders, which I
And
do.
you do, obviously.
too.
When you do stand-up, you're doing your real stand-up.
Right.
Which is why it's so notably funnier
Right, because it's
than
so much
anything.
harder to write stand-up for someone and
Absolutely.
have them deliver it.
And the writing staff on the show takes notes on that.
Absolutely. Yeah, we could learn a thing or two.
But Zach, how about yourself? How much do you bring to your character?
I'm one of the few people on the show whose character is actually much further along in his stand-up career than me in real life. I'm not a stand-up. I have done it maybe twice in my life, but my character, I think, is a stand-up. He like runs an open mic. So that's actually, I'm like 2 years ahead of where I am. My character is. It's rare. It's difficult.
I'm waiting for the fan fiction that explores the sometimes erotic backstory of
Often
you.
erotic, yes.
Your character is known as, in scripts, Chicken
Chicken
Wing.
Wing Man.
Because in the pilot, Zach was so funny and he was eating chicken wings. Just because in the script I wrote he's eating chicken wings, because that's the sort of thing you do at an open mic. And he was so funny specifically with his wing work. Like the well-timed bite and the dip,
Right.
sometimes ranch, sometimes blue.
I'm happy to display some of it.
If we could
Here
fly some
today.
in.
Let's order some chicken wings right
They
now.
bring out
Let's
the
pick up
wing?
phone that we
I
could
bet
use.
if Liam Neeson asked for wings, there'd be some wings. They'd commute those in. He told me to mention the movie.
Oh, of course, yes, yeah, I've got to work that in. Now, obviously, a big part of, as you mentioned, Aparna, there's sort of a big part of any person standing out in comedy is bombing, their first experience bombing. So I don't know if anyone in this room has had experience bombing in front of a crowd. What can you tell us? What does it feel like in a few succinct words? What does bombing feel like?
Probably like dying. I think dying in front of people. But I mean, it's like, I guess it's the idea is like something that you are so passionate about and care about to the degree that you would be in like, you know, like a half full basement on a Wednesday night or something, like the amount that would make you care about something to be there, and then to see everyone just watch you fail at it completely. Like,
And something that worked at another point.
right.
Right?
So then it's that mind warp of like, you're like, oh, but I know this is funny to some people, not you guys, and then you can't get mad at them because they're like who you're trying to work with. Yeah, so it's tricky, but I would say the worst feeling possible. Yeah.
In the 90s, it felt like the goal of every stand-up comic was the sitcom, right? The network sitcom. That was what you were working towards. In this show and in real life, it feels like there's so many diverse ways for comics to sort of make their star known now. What if there's one thing, what are comics working for? What signifies success these days?
Outlanders.
Oh, okay. Casserole and Outlander, all right.
I just found out about the show Outlanders, so
He's going to binge it right
I'm
when we're
going
done.
to work
Yeah.
it into this as much as I can. Who here's an Outlanders fan? Just a round of applause. Anybody?
Woo!
Oh, somebody.
The creator of
outside the
Outlanders is
room.
in the back. I thought it was a wildly... Ethan, you've steered me wrong.
Sorry.
Well, I don't know. It's an interesting question because I think in the 80s and 90s you wanted to have a sitcom, and that was where you got like Seinfeld and Mad About You or Everybody Loves Raymond. Nowadays, I think you could be hugely YouTube famous or like a Snapchat celebrity, or you mentioned that I have a podcast. That's like another way of like getting out there and finding fans. So it's actually a pretty exciting time to be a creative anything.
Right.
A photographer, a writer, a stand-up, whatever it might be. There's so much need for content. I mean, that's why we're here. We're creating content for a streaming website right now.
Right.
And that's a wonderful time to be. Whereas, there used to be like 5 networks and you had to get a slot there, and if it didn't work, you'd go away. And that's an exciting thing. And I think a lot of younger people are benefiting from that. Right. And I, for one, think that's great.
Teach
I'm not in favor. I think there should only be 5 people in show business.
And 2 of them are Oprah.
Right, yes, of course.
That's how powerful she
That's
is.
how powerful. She did it for 2 people.
Yeah.
Obviously, as you mentioned, Sarah Silverman's been on the show, T.J. Miller's been on the show. So there are what sort of for the very successful comedians on that level? What are sort of the things that you? How do you
What
look at
sort
them as
of
role
things are you
models?
overhearing upstairs
That's T.J. Miller jumping
during
up.
this question? How many lanes of bowling are right above our heads? Just for the people streaming, I know the lingo. For the people streaming at home, there's a lot of noise upstairs.
There's a lot of noise.
And what was your question? Because I was just fearing for my death.
Sure. for some of the people on the show who have sort of attained that huge level of celebrity, like Sarah Silverman,
Yeah.
what sort of when you look at them, what do you aspire about their careers yourselves? What sort of things do you look at to model yours own?
I think a successful comedian is kind of like a successful person in that they figure out who they are and how to be that comfortably honestly, and dare I use the word balanced.
Right.
They kind of figure out their weirdness and their relatability and kind of ride it right in the middle. So that's what I think makes comedians so appealing. And one of the things that's fun about Crashing is, Dave Attell, Artie Lang, you mentioned some of the others. Bill Burr is on the second season. Lucas Brothers, John Mulaney, Gilbert Gottfried. Some really, Penn Jillette is in the first episode, which is incredible. These are just like naturally, I'm going to die, incredibly engaging, what's happening above me, people.
The Outlander fans.
Yes, exactly. They're mad at me because they think I'm not mentioning it enough. Is what's happening.
Mention it more, exactly.
I just think, you watch other shows that are about, let's say, dentists, and it's weird when they're funny. On our show, even when my wife is leaving me, I'm no dentist. I get to make little jokes no matter what's going on. And then you also get a lot of stand-up peppered in as well. But I think that's going to be interesting. It's also a very New York show. You get to see not just what it's like to become a stand-up, what it's like to become a stand-up in this city, which is insane. This city does not want any of us here. It is trying to get us to leave at every moment. It's so cold out right now. Phone calls are shorter. Most of my phone calls end with, "This isn't worth it. My hand is freezing." And then I just put it in my pocket and wait for them to unfreeze. But yeah.
You buried the lead on guest stars for season 2 a little bit because Dr. Oz is in the...
Dr. Mehmet Oz?
So Dr. Mehmet Oz is in one of the second episodes. How did that come about? And how did you get... And what was the funniest off-camera moment with him?
I met Dr. Oz because I have pancreatitis.
Oh, all right. Well, could he help you with that?
I'm just kidding. That's so funny.
What a reveal.
Yeah. This is where I wanted to break the news. No, warm-up. I used to do warm-up for The Daily Show, which films over here on the far west side. And so my character on the show does warm-up, as we mentioned. And you kind of have to get it where you can. And what's weird is they have comedians warming up shows that you might not think a comedian is involved in. In the first season, we did The Rachel Ray Show, which has Joey Cola is the warm-up. And this season, Pete actually accidentally gets stoned. Which is a term people use for high on marijuana. And then he gets a random call that he's being called on to fill in for the warm-up guy at Dr. Oz. So Pete has to go and do warm-up for Dr. Oz stoned. What that might be like, you ask? Well, January 14th, Crashing premieres on HBO after Outlanders, which is on Stars, but you can watch it before.
You can.
You can.
Stream anything these days.
I'm here to promote TV in general.
Dying medium of television.
Here to get the word out. Yeah.
It's safe to say, Crashing certainly I wouldn't call it necessarily a political show, but you are dealing with some real world issues. In the first episode, for example, there's a whole conversation about consent, for example. Pete goes on, what I guess you could describe a one-night stand with someone, and there's a discussion about consent.
You know what's funny is there's a scene where Pete has sex for the first time, and that's based on my real life. When I had sex for the first time, I was married for 6 years, first person I had ever dated, and then I got divorced, and then I was just like out in the scene, like out in the dating scene. And this is something I haven't seen on TV before. Usually when somebody is left by their wife, the next scene is a montage of one-night stands and a guy drunk talking to a bartender just like, I don't know what to do, but I keep getting laid. In my experience, that is not what it is. You're super vulnerable, you don't know what you're doing, and you're awkward. My character is religious, and he's very, very sweet and polite. And it's based on that time in my life for sure. And when I had sex for the first time after my wife, literally before we had sex, I said, you want to have sex?
Right.
Like we were naked, and I was like, is this?
Right.
And now, watching it through our lens now, that seems like a comment on consent and what we're dealing with as a nation. But really, I've been dealing with those feelings my whole life. It's like, is this okay? Because when you're raised thinking that sex is kind of like a bad thing, you're just like, are you sure?
Right.
And it's for fear of hellfire.
Right.
But don't worry, there's no hell.
Right, no.
It's no Outlanders.
It's no Outlanders.
It's no Outlanders.
Yeah.
Sex with me is no Outlanders. I'll say that. There is time travel. We're all going to watch Outlanders after
exactly.
this.
That's the main takeaway here.
But you're absolutely right. So what I'm saying is we shot all that and I wrote all that based on stuff that happened before. But now, watching it, there was like a scene that we shot just for fun where Pete is hitting on the girl that he wants to go home with. Yeah. And he's just kind of like, well, it'd be kind of funny if he was very aggressive. Like just kind of like you don't see that coming.
Right.
He gets off stage, he's a little drunk, and then we're watching it after everything happened, after everything continues to happen, and we're like, oh shit, like things have changed. Like people are gonna be watching this differently. But we were very happy to just go back to the way it was originally intended, which is that Pete's a fish out of water, he doesn't know what he's doing, so he's hyper sweet. I think that's one of the things that people potentially relate to about Crashing is it's about a guy who is decent. It's kind of fun in this world. I jokingly call the other comedians the scumbags, and Pete's just kind of this G-shucks, happy to be here guy. And there's something kind of fun to root for that guy, to watch him kind of succeed and fail is an interesting journey.
Sure.
And something you don't always see. He's not a jerk.
Right, absolutely. Well, I mean, in the comedy world right now, there certainly have been moments, we've seen sort of, I guess, Time's Up, Me Too moments certainly come out. For the three of you, how do you feel about, how do you feel you can be better allies for women? Aparna, what would you like to see some of your male colleagues do to speak up for women in the industry, too?
I think right now, the importance is like with men of just providing support in the sense of like solidarity, but also just speaking out that it is a problem. Because I feel like it's easy for women to be like, this happened to me, but then it's like, that's only half the equation.
Right.
And I think men can show up and listen, but it's also a matter of being like, we're part of the problem, we're part of this culture, and we need to be a part of, breaking down this culture as much as you guys are.
Yeah, cut it out.
Right, yeah.
It is interesting. We want people to be heard. We want women to be heard and to be believed, and we want to listen. But also the end goal of all this awareness is hopefully a safer world for women. And it can be, I get caught up in it too, who's going to be broken, what's the next scandal. What I really spend more time meditating on, just like thinking about, is how unsafe a huge swath of our population feels and how terrible that must be. And hopefully, you used to have to be a good person because you wanted to be a good person. Now there's like this matrix of accountability, which should, I hope, lead to a safer world for women, which is hopefully going to be the wonderful outcome of this. I hope. It feels like that sort of shift.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving forward in Crashing, as we get to the end of season 2, what do you hope to see each of your characters do in season 3? Do you already have ideas for where you go next?
Yeah. Nude model.
Oh, all right.
Wow.
Tasteful for art classes. There's might be a vase over my face.
Just your face.
I don't want them to know it's me. Season 2, Zach plays my manager, and that's a relationship I want to see flourish and see what kind of wacky stuff, because when you have a really bad manager, I'm just kidding, that's my manager. I'm teasing, that was a joke just for him. Look, when you have a really bad manager who shows up mid-interview, I'm just kidding, I love him, Dave Rath, introduced me to Judd Apatow, one of my dear friends. But when you have a manager, now it's 2. Now, so I'd like to see what Zach thinks is right for my career. Sending Pete out on the road is a huge thing for a comedian. And it'd be interesting to see if season 3, we get to follow Pete losing his mind, going on the road for like 2-3 weeks at a time, not talking to another person, only doing stand-up one night here at colleges, really leads to like a level of insanity. I used to drive in my car singing like Ray Romano just to keep myself just like, I can feel it coming in the air tonight. Just, that's how crazy you're going. And then I think Pete would come back to the city because it has so much to do with New York.
Right.
But then like, one of the funny things is if you go on the road, when you come back, if you're gone for months, when you come back to New York, everything's changed. Everything's different. Like people have quit, people have moved on. The club that you used to work at is now a Chinese restaurant. Right. And that's one of the weird things about showbiz. And one of the things I like to communicate in the show is even if I tried to give someone really good advice, the way everything changes every 6 months, you could never write a book about how to make it in New York as a stand-up, because by the time it was published, it would be almost irrelevant. And I think I'd like to see Pete always struggling, never really making it. I don't want it to be a show about a successful, easy life.
Right.
I want it to be how I think a lot of us feel that are chasing our dreams. Like, it's these micro victories, right. Like a little thing here, a little thing there. It takes 10, 15 years before I had anything that my parents even acknowledged was valid. You know what I mean? And that's the story I like to share with creative people of all types. And hopefully they feel a little solidarity when they watch the show.
Right. On the other hand, you both just would be overnight successes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think Anaya should have her own show. So then it'd be like a show within a show. And then Pete would be such a good contrast to that.
It is funny, in our group with Anaya, Aparna's character, and there's Henry Zabrowski, who plays a guy named Porter, we start dealing with those dynamics in the second season. What happens when one of the young guys gets a break and it's not you?
Right.
So again, like we didn't want it to be Pete because you have to deal with, like, oh, he's a sweet guy, but deep down he's like really pissed that like somebody got something that he wanted, and that's such an undercurrent, especially when you're an open micer.
Yeah.
If someone is plucked out and is on TV, you're like, good for you, but you want to throw them in a fiery canoe, like a canoe that's on the water but it's on fire, and you get them in it, and it's kind of great because it was hard to nail, and then they just kind of burn, and you know if they tipped either way, they'd put themselves out. But
Yeah. That's an Outlander storyline, by the way. Zach, how about you? Where would you like to see Chicken Wing Man go?
I'd like to see him do a full hour set and dedicate 2 full episodes to that. I don't know if you... We'll talk about that later, but I think that's really the only way for his storyline to kind of like flourish.
well, I'd say my manager heard you, but he's on his phone.
Oh, okay. Well, there we go. Talking to the people upstairs, saying,
Trying
hit
to
the
get
wall
more
more.
noise.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. There's not enough noise yet. Please, get some.
My goodness. No, Zach is, I mean, both of these guys are incredibly hilarious, and that's what's been so fun about the show, is Aparna was just a small part, and then we were like, oh my God, like, it's so fun working with Judd and working with HBO that allows us to find the show as we go in a certain way. So it's not all scripted out. We kind of go like, oh, Judd was directing Zach, and we ruined so many takes laughing that Judd was just like, what if he's Pete's manager? And that's a very good Judd Apatow impression. I want you all to go home and Google what he sounds like and laugh at that later, because that was perfect. But it's super fun to see, and we'll see what happens with Aparna, and I'm excited to see how I disappoint, because managers get 10%.
Right.
You know, it's a question if they're worth it. I love my manager so much, but he gets 10% of Pete, so they're in cahoots together.
Right. There
So
you
we'll see. We'll see.
All right, some lightning round questions. So, along with marijuana, Jeff Sessions has outlawed all comedy albums. Except one. You get to save one. What's the comedy album you save for posterity?
I thought you weren't joking, and I was just like,
no, I'm not.
I
wow,
really
Look at the
thought-
news.
what a
Just
crazy world. Crazy world. Zach Cherry?
Blink 182 live album as a middle schooler. I thought that was the funniest
That's
thing
comedy,
I'd ever
okay.
heard in the world. So I'd save that.
I'm going to go with Maria Bamford's first album.
What was that one called?
Just her name, Maria Bamford.
Maria.
Wow. Wow. I love Steve Martin's stand-up records. If anybody loves Steve Martin, there's 3 CDs waiting for you that you're going to love. Let's Get Small, Comedy Is Not Pretty, and what's the third one?
Outlander.
Outlander. Outlanders.
Outlander. Sorry, of course.
He time travels, he tells jokes. There's a bow and arrow.
Let's see. You can reboot one of these mid-'90s must-see TV sitcoms. The Single Guy, Suddenly Susan, or Daddy-O. Which one do you do?
The Single Susan-O. All 3.
Wow.
You guys don't have to answer.
Yeah. I think he speaks for all of us.
Yeah, I was going to say the single Susan-O also.
Oh, okay.
Were you really?
Manager-client. I like it.
I'm just trying to think of that third season. Dave, do you know what it is? Comedy Is Not Pretty. Let's Get Small. Wild and Crazy Guy.
Oh, there you go.
Great records. Let's just listen to them.
Let's put them on right now.
pipe in
Put the
that
mics
audio.
down. Open up. Pete, you have a history with Batman, as people who seen your talk show know. So you're dangling from a skyscraper. Only one Batman can save you. Do you choose Lego Batman or Batfleck?
I'm going Batfleck. I'm 6'6". I don't trust a jointless toy to save me. Like, I think you're crazy.
I'm like, what?
I don't mind Affleck as Batman. Some people didn't like it. I'm okay with it. Well, it's Ben Affleck. It's fine. What do you need? I think Christian Bale is probably the best. Keaton probably tied for first.
Adam West?
Adam West, I think that's that's a deflection.
Okay.
When you're like, what's your best Batman? You're like, Adam West. All right, fuck you too. I thought we were talking about best Batmans, and you're just like, you ever watch weird TV?
He's the only Batman with drawn-on eyebrows.
That's not true, Kilmer.
Good point.
And drawn on nipples on Clooney. Nobody liked
right.
Clooney. Clooney didn't like Clooney Batman. But that sounds like something I did alone in the car on the road. Was Batman voice. Yeah.
And then let's see. You obviously all work at HBO. If you could be in the final season of Game of Thrones somehow, what would your character be?
Just a guy with the first season of Outlanders. Just saying, I'm telling you, if you guys had a Blu-ray player, we could watch the show. And they're like, what magic brought thee here? And I'm like, look, these are discs. They have shows on them. And they're like, what are shows? And then they burn me in a canoe. I think I've made my point.
Way to tie it all together.
Susan Daddio. What was the question, really, though?
Who would you be on Game of Thrones if you could? Since you have the HBO hookup there, like who if you could
who
create
would
a
I
role?
be?
What role would you create for yourself?
Yeah, okay. I guess I'd be like, there's Peter Dinklage, and then there'd be me, and I'm, another Peter. So there'd be Peter Dinklage. His name on the show is Peter Dinklage, right?
Yes. Oh, of course. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Right.
Peter Dinklage and then Peter Holmes.
I think I'd be like some kind of quirky secretary, probably.
I like it.
Who shows up and sort of spices up.
Have you seen the show?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's like a workplace with dragons. Workplace comedy with dragons.
I would be my same character from Crashing and try and do like a crossover episode to establish that they're in the same universe.
Yes.
Would they have chicken wings in Westeros though? Like, what's the
Maybe
Westeros
a
version of that?
mutton wing,
Okay, I like it. Dragon wings.
Dragon wing.
dragon wing.
Or chicken legs.
Oh, there we go.
I don't know much about the olden times, but everyone was eating big chicken legs. I don't know where they got them. No supermarkets, but they had them.
A farm. There's
A
like
farm,
chicken leg
probably.
farm.
A
Right,
farm.
exactly, where they grew them all.
Yeah.
All right, I think we have audience Q&A time, so let's turn it over to the audience.
Hey guys, thanks so much for being here today. I love the show, and
thanks, man.
I had a bunch of my friends work on it as background. Peter's always so gracious, and it's always such a positive set. I just want to thank you.
Oh, thanks, man.
What has it been like for you emotionally, like revisiting these events and locations from earlier in your career, and how has it affected your current stand-up material?
Yeah, I think it's made me really, really grateful because it's so hard. It's so hard. Starting stand-up is the worst. It's so difficult. And when we would bomb on the show, like I'd have to bomb all the time. And even though it's pretend and all these great background actors letting me bomb, my back would start sweating. My throat would get dry. I'd get all moist. I'm just like, my body had no idea it was pretend. So it was really, really traumatic. So we're leaving it all out there. I don't want to say it's the next Outlanders, but I appreciate it. Did you do background on it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
And for
man.
a lot of those scenes, like comedy shows.
That's
great.
great.
So it's fun, and people are actually doing different material each take.
Yeah.
So it's really cool. It's really
Yeah,
fun.
were you first season or second season?
Both.
Really? Did you see Bill Burr?
No, I wasn't there for that. I
Oh
wish.
man, because he made me look like a chump. Like I like to keep the thing going and having fun with the background actors, but Bill the whole day, he's just the funniest guy. The whole day was a show, and I was like, well, that's how you do it. And he was like, that's how you do it. That's a really good Bill Burr. Google Judd, Google Bill, laugh later. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. If everybody could start their question with a very nice compliment, that would be really helpful to me. Compliment.
Well, I was gonna give you one.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I actually enjoyed your skits that you've done on College Humor and the Pete
Thanks,
Holmes
man.
show as well.
That's very kind. Now I feel like a jerk.
It's not a problem. I was just wondering, like, how much do you get to play around with, like, when you're portraying yourself on screen, like, based on your own life, like, how much do you take liberties on, like, the stuff that's happened to you as opposed to, like,
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we always start from a place of reality, meaning like Pete will do warm up, but then we'll add Dr. Oz. Or like in the example of my wife and I splitting up, we'll add something big, like a yard sale or a car crash or some event, because in reality it's like eating Chinese food in the dark. Like there's not a lot of comedy to it. So what we do is we take what really happened and the real feelings, and then hopefully we make them funnier and more interesting. But usually when we're improvising or something on set, it's really helpful when you're playing yourself, because you can just, you know yourself better than anybody, so you can really be your full person instead of being like, okay, I have to improvise as a pirate. Like, how do I do that? I can just be myself. So it's super fun. Same with you two.
Oh boy.
Got accusatory at the end. Thanks for your question. I think we have this guy.
Hi. So now that you have a successful show on HBO, do you feel like this was sort of your goal as when you guys were pursuing your career as comedians or writers, or do you enjoy working on scripted? I know you're on Master of None for an episode. Do you enjoy doing more scripted work or working on your own materials?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I think Chris Rock said it's like stand-ups are like waiters, and then at a certain point they're just like, you should manage a restaurant. And that's kind of what it's like. Like, what are the chances that if you're a good waiter, you'd also be a good chef and business person and stuff? That's a little bit what it's like going into TV. But I would say, absolutely, when I was starting out, I remember actually thinking like, oh, I could never have a TV show. It was like this weird moment backstage. And then I was like, well, then you never will. And I took a little moment to correct that negative thinking. I'm not saying I manifested the show. I do think it's helpful, though, to believe that you can do things, because I was like, I would like to do that. And doing that, the first step of that is admitting it to yourself and kind of admitting it to other people, because it's kind of embarrassing. Like when you're kind of fumbling through stand-up and you're like, one day I'd like my own show. Like people don't believe you, but you kind of have to hold on to that little fire inside. And then, Aparna, what was it like being on another show?
What other show?
Correct answer, unless it's Outlanders.
Yeah, I know no other shows. No, I guess Pete's right. Like when you start, you sort of have no goal other than to like keep doing stand-up and to be able to support yourself doing stand-up. So I feel like anything else that comes along by virtue of that is sort of like icing on the cake. And TV is kind of its own thing, but it's nice with Crashing that like it is a show about stand-up and featuring a lot of like comedians and other stand-ups. So it did feel like weirdly like you weren't really acting. It was almost like when we were on set, did feel like just hanging out in a sense. So I think that was sort of a sweet spot in the acting work I've done, that it felt like even less like really having to depart into a character rather than just like being yourself, which is the nice thing about stand-up. It's like a job where you just have to be yourself.
And then it's been super fun finding other stand-ups that we all started together. Like almost any time we had a cameo, it was somebody that I like handed out flyers with or something. So it's super fun to like use this opportunity. The whole community kind of gets involved. Like when I go to the Cellar now, the Comedy Cellar, you look at the lineup, it's like the number of people that have been on our show is kind of staggering, and it's so fun. It's not charity, these people are amazing, but it's so fun to kind of circle back. It's almost like going back to college and being like, oh, let's do this all together, which is a real thrill.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming out today. Thanks to the Crashing Trio.
Yeah.
Watch the show Sunday, 10:30 p.m. on HBO. And
It's a
thanks
little
lot, everyone.
late. That's a little late.
A little bit. But then save for Outlander
Okay, yeah,
afterwards, so it's okay.